Just twice.
Okay, it is recording. Well, thank you, RJ, for coming on board here to talk to my students in the DES 570 class at San Francisco State. They are just beginning the process of putting their portfolios together. It's an exciting semester, and one big portion of it is figuring out how to take a lot of their research that they've written up in these rather dense design briefs and figuring out how to make visual storytelling out of it. And so you are the master of kind of data visualization. I just want to say that I came upon connecting to you via, I think, via Jen Fraser and her science communication lab. And I will kind of go over that with my students, but that's kind of a fun way, roundabout way to connect with all sorts of cool design peeps. So, RJ, yeah, tell us maybe, what you're about. Maybe show us a typical project of yours. There's one I liked on your website. But you can give us a little background on yourself and then you can kind of take it away and I'll interject with some questions. How about that?
Sure. Hello everybody. My name's RJ. I live and work at a dog patch in San Francisco, and have enjoyed and been to your campus several times. So I'm a neighbor and a friend. The I used to introduce myself as a data storyteller. Now I have an even more plain sort of introduction where I just tell people that I make maps and charts. And so I make maps and charts, and
Love that.
I'm I'm sort of obsessed with maps and charts, and they've taken over, both my professional life, but in many ways my life beyond my profession, my passion, my hobby, a lot of my friendships. I'm sort of consumed by maps and charts. And so I've been a creative, mostly independent for over a decade now. And, the fact that I've been able to survive as a creative independent for over a decade is a product of sort of a lot of luck and fortune, but also a lot of, a lot of mistakes, honestly. It's like I'd probably make a lot more money in a traditional corporate career, but maybe I'm not cut out for a traditional corporate career, and so I had to figure this out instead. So that's my that's sort of a really, sort of abstract introduction. Maybe a little bit more concretely is I should show some work. But I've done work for a lot of fancy pants clients. I've done work for all the big tech companies. I've served My work's been shown or served Obama, Trump, and Biden White Houses.
Ooh.
Um, I've taught workshops and at Letterform Archive, Cooper Union, which are kind of East Coast and West Coast design bastions. But I've also lectured at Stanford and at MIT, and so anyway, let's look
Can
at
I
some
can
work.
I
Yeah.
interject though and ask what your undergraduate or graduate, what your actual education was? Because it doesn't always, I know
Mm,
these are very non-linear
yeah.
paths we go through, especially, designers and creatives like
Yeah.
yourself.
So there's not a lot of people like me who specialize in data graphics. But those who are out there come from a variety of fields. They're usually designers, architects, or engineers in training, although people, can certainly come from other fields. But those are solid kind of like career paths, especially architects, because in America especially, we don't really build interesting buildings anymore. We hardly build at all, and it's certainly an issue in San Francisco, right? And so and so there's a lot of architects in information
Hmm,
design.
interesting.
And architects are kind of uniquely qualified because they are already mathematically, inclined, but also they can draw. They know how to draw. They know how to project manage. They know how to integrate a lot of different technologies and skills all into a single project, which is sort of what information design requires. Engineers kind of have to learn how to do that, and designers, I think, also like designers have to learn how to. They might have to learn how to code or how to do math, whereas engineers have to learn how to do art. And so, I have a lot of sympathy for architects. My father is an architect, and so I have sort of a loose familial background there. But I'm not an architect. I'm an engineer. I went to engineering school. I got a graduate degree in engineering. I worked as an engineer for a few years as a pure engineer, and I realized I was a fantastic engineering student, like sort of like Mr. 4.0, full ride to a fancy school, sort of academic scholarship, fantastic student, but not a very good actually practicing engineer.
Well,
like
that's a really
like
good distinction, I think, and it can also go the other way where you
oh,
are
okay, so yeah, are these undergrads or grad students?
undergraduate mostly.
Yeah. So I mean, one of my friends who I won't name, but a real cut up kind of guy. I mean, I befriended him on the way back from the campus pub back to our dorms one night, and he was sloshed, and I mean, just like kind of like a solid C minus student, and that was his engineering school undergraduate experience, and he now leads like a multi-billion dollar um robot company.
Yeah, yeah.
So like,
So it's what
I
you
mean,
do after it's over that is
yeah, it's not like,
where we're going. That's
yeah,
it's
I
this
mean,
transition
yeah,
for
your college
the high and the
experience
low.
is a lot, but it isn't your destiny. Um, and so it can go either way. So I was sort of frustrated by my engineering experience, and particularly what I was frustrated by is that as an engineer, you're given in the design world what we call a brief. In the engineering world, it'd be called specs. But
Mhm.
basically, you're sort of like, this is the problem you have to solve, and it's handed to you, and it's your job to go solve it. The problem is that or the issue with that situation that I had is that I never really got to talk to the people who had the problem. I
Mhm.
wasn't involved with diagnosing the problem and helping them figure out and formulating the problem. But also, my because there was a barrier between me and the people who had the problem, I didn't get to really get any of the reward of solving the problem.
Right.
There was no human interface. It was only technology, and pure technology just didn't satisfy enough of me. I didn't have enough of the engineering mindset to be happy with just working in pure technology. And so I thought, like, what are the real problems? I don't think any of our problems today have anything to do with technology. Technology, is as good as it needs to be. Like, all of our big problems are people problems. And so I went to MBA school because I wanted to study people and try to understand how to work with people. And so I got a graduate degree in engineering. I worked for a few years, and then I went back and got a fancy pants MBA from MIT. And that is during that program is when I decided to commit myself to information design. And
Mhm.
that decision was, oh gosh, 13 years ago. Yeah.
And what I'm hoping and what I think I've seen at least around San Francisco is that a lot of those engineering firms are realizing that disconnect that there's a reward for having designers be part of some of the engineering so that it might not
Yeah.
be as true, but I'm hoping that there is a proportion that there is a greater recognition that
Yeah. I
space is
mean,
where designers come in.
one
Uh,
would hope so. I mean, we're in a very strange. I think we're in a very strange market right now. We're in a market where power is enormously concentrated and further concentrating, and so I can't.
anyway, that was
It's hard for me to comment on sort of like the field right now, and
yeah.
in a particularly
Okay,
hopeful manner.
we'll keep on track here.
Yeah. Okay. So I started a blog in 2013, again, I guess a dozen years ago or so. And and one of my early pieces that I published on this blog, and this is sort of like, I don't know, like there was from our perspective, the internet in 2013 was still a really exciting and happy place to be. I think now, the internet is sort of social media, algorithmic feeds, and a lot of kind of outrage bait. And that's not how it used to be. The internet used to be, it actually used to be an internet, meaning that it wasn't about a single flow of algorithms to consumers. It was more of a web of people sharing things amongst themselves. And so I benefited greatly from that. I talked about being fortunate and lucky. I couldn't be where I am if the internet wasn't what it was in 2012, 2013, 2014. And so one of the pieces I published on my little blog went super viral in early 2014. And I don't know if you want to show it, Josie, but it's the
Oh, yeah, you can share.
yeah. Let me pull it up, and I'll give like kind of a quick
Yeah, that would be great.
a quick kind of like show of the piece that sort of like duped me into committing myself in to the last however long. Um, but this piece is called Creative Routines. It was published in, let's see, there we go. It was published in early 2014,
Oh, I
and
love
like
this.
the idea is that um it's like all these historic creatives, and it's their 24 hour like kind of day, and it's
Hmm.
color coded to what they're doing during the day. And how I published it is what's on the right. I published kind of like this giant image, sort of like a poster.
Hmm.
And the internet, being the monster that it is, the internet didn't um didn't share it like this. What the internet did is it cut it up, and particularly the Huffington Post did this. And so the
Hmm.
Huffington Post took this image, cut it up into tiles. And so what people saw, so they didn't get to compare Beethoven and Mozart, for example. What they did is they saw a single tile like this, one at a time.
Right.
And my perspective on this is that it was successful because when you when you only have one in front of you, you compare Mozart to yourself, right? You look at Mozart and like, oh, he doesn't get enough sleep. I don't get enough sleep, and so like it sort of humanizes this creator, and it also elevates you because you're able to compare yourself to the creator. And so it's sort of a stars, they're just like us kind of
Hmm.
effect.
Hmm.
Um, and so this piece went really got a lot of attention in 2014. um and I was sort of, I don't know, not shell shocked, but I was sort of stunned. And it gave me actually quite a lot of creative block, because I thought that the because this had so much attention. I mean, Richard Branson shared it, Oprah shared it, like,
Wow.
it was a lot of big
Yeah.
accounts. And the and so I thought that everybody's eyes were on me, and that everybody would be waiting for the next thing I did, and that I'd have to kind of make something as creative and as magical. And that's actually not how the internet works at all.
No.
um One of the nice things about the internet is that if you make something crappy and publish it, nobody will see it, because if it's
Yeah. Yeah.
crappy, it won't travel. So there's
It's
actually very little cost on the internet to publishing crap. And if you're familiar with the internet, then you should be familiar with that, because the internet's loaded with garbage. Um, okay, so but eventually I did publish something else. And so the next thing that I published, let's see if we can get the right tab here, is this. And this is an animated looping animation called Bloom. And what you see is, and it's another sort of, going around the circle kind of situation.
Mhm.
What this is going around the circle, though, is it's a Virginia garden, and it's when flowers start blooming and when they stop blooming. And so you're going around in sort of like, every wedge is maybe like 2 weeks of the year. And so you're going through the seasons, and you're seeing what flowers kind of pop up and how long they bloom. And so early in the spring, you have kind of all these flowering trees that maybe only flower for like a week or so, very, very short, where, some other flowers hang on for a little bit longer. And so this was kind of like the next big thing that I did. And it took me months to, kind of like figure out what I wanted to do. And I published this, and I'm, still like quite fond of it. But this is like nobody cared about this.
not
Like,
even the garden clubs of
yeah.
Virginia.
Yeah, not even, well, like how would you even put it on their radar, right? And so I can talk a little bit about, if it's interesting, I could talk now about, some of like the creative process behind it, like why I made it, how I made it, that kind of thing. Would that be interesting, or would you rather return to that later?
Yeah. I think. Yeah, I think that would be good. One of the things that they have to that my students will be doing in the middle of the semester is really creating one of their projects and making a case study out of it. So
Hmm.
just that really quick, maybe case study of how much research you did in terms of the blooms of,
Hmm.
Virginia, and coming up with that animated. I assume it's just a GIF
Hmm.
um, that is moving around, but it's such a great format. And yeah, get maybe just a brief, and then I would um, uh, love to hear kind of how maybe starting with Bloom, the technologies are changing so quickly. What you're looking to as your way of presenting material now? Are you still using these kind of animated um, formats, or does it
Mm.
really depend on the client and the project?
Sure. Okay, so Bloom first.
Yeah.
So um, any of these sort of performances that I do, and I consider them very performative,
Mhm.
these pieces that I publish. Um, you mentioned before the call talking about portfolio. And the thing is you don't actually have to make a lot of pieces for a good portfolio. Um, but like the pieces in your portfolio should be really good. And so
Mhm.
my strategy is to basically try to do one really good thing a year. And if I do one really good thing a year, then in a decade you have a pretty phenomenal portfolio,
Mhm.
right? Like, and uh, is there a way to do it faster than that? Um, yeah, like, yeah, I'm sure. And like, obviously you're going to need, you can't wait a decade to make a portfolio, but like, don't discount, the importance of, of, um, of making, really, really high quality work. And if it takes a little bit longer, like that's okay. And so here's, ostensibly like sort of what my portfolio is right now. And like, you scroll through this and it like, I don't know, it's very colorful. It's exciting. There's a lot going on. There's like variation, but it's like not that many tiles. It's like a what, 4 by 5, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's like 20 tiles, right? And each of these like links to a different, there's creative routines. Here's Bloom. You can see these projects that are over a decade old, and they're all in here. Um, so that's sort of like 1 minute on portfolios. If we go into Bloom, so here it is again. The so like, why did I make this? So here is, let's see if we can see this a little bit bigger. Um, so here's one of the reasons. I wanted to figure out how to do digital illustration. This is something I didn't know how to do. I'm not trained as an illustrator or artist or anything. And so I wanted a project that would force me to illustrate a lot. And so I don't know, looking 10 years on, are these good illustrations or not? I don't know. But um I woke up every morning for a month and I drew 5 flowers. And by drew, what I mean is I found images of existing flowers and traced them, in whatever sort of emerging style that I kind of like concocted. You can see it's sort of, I don't know, kind of like line work and some fill work, and there's some gradients. And I kind of like I did my best.
Mhm.
But like
And
at the end of
Procreate
it,
now is so good at things like this.
what's that?
Using Procreate now is so helpful, and
Yeah, and I do use I have Procreate. I haven't used Procreate in a while. I guess the digital illustration, what I've learned, because I'm doing a project now that required a little bit of digital illustration,
Mhm.
is the recent Mac OS allows you to mirror your computer onto your iPad.
Oh wow.
And I find that actually to be like the most helpful, because it's not like when I made this project, for example, I was in an iPad app
Mhm.
and I would do the illustration and I'd have to send the file to the computer, or maybe it would sync automatically. But there was a real divide that this is an iPad file, or this is
Right.
like it's iPad time now. And now the Mac can actually sync with the iPad. Like you can plug your iPad into the Mac and you can just use it as a drawing surface.
Right.
And what's great is that there are some things in illustration that are better on desktop,
Hmm.
and there are some things that are better that you want like actually a stylus in your hand to work on. And like you can just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth really effortlessly. And so that's what I've been doing on like a recent digital illustration project. Back to Bloom. So one of the things I wanted to figure out how to do was how to illustrate. And so I woke up early and drew 5 flowers every morning, I don't know, 15 minutes of flower or something like that. And I did that, I did it 212 flowers. And like by the end of that, like, you're going to learn something about digital illustration. And these are 5 choice ones. I mean, these are the ones I like. Or these are the ones I like. Okay, so that was one ingredient. Another motivating thing is this. So this is a tabletop whale. This is another sort of blog, kind of like mine, by a woman named Eleanor Lutz, who I believe right now is at the New York Times. But
Hmm.
back then, she was sort of like a creative independent, kind of like me. And she was putting out these like insane scientific looping GIFs. So here's one of them. So this is from 2014. So this is like what I was looking at when I made Bloom. Flight videos deconstructed. And then here's another one. 3 different ways to breathe. So she's has a biology background, very sciencey, and I'm looking at these, and I just like there's so much color and there's so much life in them, and they're just so exciting. And what's really lovely is that after she published this breathing one, she published this, which she published a short tutorial on how to make a GIF, like she does. And so
Hmm.
this was a major that this was a major influence for me. It's like I want to figure out how to make a tabletop whale style looping GIF. And the thing about the GIF is that it's like the challenge isn't making the artwork or the animation or anything. The challenge is making a file small enough that it can travel on the internet.
Right.
Because if the file's too big, it'll take too long to load or it won't load at all. It won't work on mobile, especially in 2014, 2015 internet, right? Internet that's a decade older is a lot slower. And so the whole kind of game is, can you make a complex illustration, but package it into a very, very small file? And you do that by limiting your color palette. If you notice, these color palette is very limited. You do that by by having a loop which is actually not very long. Essentially not many frames to a film. So that's the second big ingredient. Is that number one is I have this idea that I want to learn how to illustrate. The second is that I want to learn how to do this technology thing. And so, that's sort of information design in a nutshell, is that you have one tech piece, you have one art piece, right? And then the third is sort of more personal. The third kind of ingredient is that I actually traveled to Monticello on a weekend trip with my wife, and she knows flowers like a 5-year-old knows dinosaurs. She
Uh-huh.
just
Yeah.
is really,
Yeah.
really great at um, honestly just seeing flowers in a way that I'll just walk past them and not notice them. She'll point them out to me, she'll name them, she'll and once I notice them, I'm able to appreciate them. But I don't have that same passion or interest or talent that she does. And so, going through a garden with her is a much more pleasurable experience than if I walk through by myself. And so we went to Monticello and saw the garden, saw all these beautiful flowers. And I came home, and that was kind of like the last piece is thinking about thinking about these flowers and thinking about how interesting it would be, because when you're there, it's overwhelming. You see all these flowers at once,
Yeah.
and to me, when I'm overwhelmed like that, I want to understand. Like
Mhm.
I want to put things in their place. I want to organize. This is sort of a character, I don't know, either feature or flaw of people like me, is that you really want to organize the world, and you're sort of almost irritated by things that aren't in their proper place.
Mhm.
Um, and so you want to figure out how to catalog things and better understand things. And this is I think a human impulse, and it can be very empowering and very useful. But of course, there's sort of a dark side to cataloging the world as
But
well.
it is the source of our whole taxonomic system of the universe.
Of
I
the Yeah,
believe.
I mean, I mean, it's biblical, so it goes back to sort of Adam naming the animals, right? Like once you put a name on something, you have power over it. And in the same way that walking through the garden, I'm sort of dazzled by the cacophony, But if I'm with my wife and she's able to say, oh, it's, this is this flower, this is that flower, these two are related to one another. This one blooms for a week, this one blooms for a month. Like once you're able to start attaching, your experience to some sort of information scaffold, um, you're able to navigate your experience a lot better, and I think appreciate your experience a lot better. Of course, but that's not reality. I mean, reality is chaotic and complex. People are chaotic and complex, and so we want to be careful when, especially when we label individuals. All right. So with that disclaimer aside, there's a really personal experience of visiting a garden, being so sort of overwhelmed in both, delightful but also confusing ways, wanting to make some order out of it. And so the other piece that you usually need for my field is data. And so I was really lucky that Monticello actually records and publishes data about their garden. And
Mm.
so I was able to, access that data about when things start to bloom, when they stop blooming, and process it and make some sense of it, and you know, organize it in a way that I could make this looping animation. And so, there is sort of the graphic technology of being able to make a GIF, the artistic talent to produce illustrations, but also the back end sort of, being able to what we call munging data
Mhm.
and sorting out data. Like all of these things are present in most data stories.
Mhm.
And that's certainly the case with Bloom. And the only by doing the work, like you'll have it's very common in any project to have a vision and sort of, it's almost like a artistic foresight or artistic vision, and that you can see it in your mind and you have such a belief in it and you want to see it in the real world so bad that you put the work in to bring it into the world. But of course, when you actually bring it into the world, it's going to look very different than what was in your head. And so there's sort of like, rubber meets the road aspect of when you're actually working with the tech and the art. You kind of, that is a creative partner in its own sense. And so your vision is one hand, and then reality is the other hand. You're trying to bring that, and working together, you kind of like, you usually make something better than what you expected. And this is an example of a project I did completely solo, but since then I've done a lot of collaborations with all kinds of people, and collaborating with others is another way to put another ingredient in the mix, another positive ingredient. And, my experience is always collaborating with others, the work gets better. The work gets much, much better. Okay, so I can show you just a couple. I actually published a blog post a long time ago about this project. And let's see if this will, yeah, there we go. And so my one aspect of my original vision, I'm going to share again. One aspect of my original vision, you can see, I think, this daffodil on the lower left.
Mhm.
And so this in itself, it should refresh. There it goes.
Yeah.
So I made that illustration, and my vision was that all of these flowers would actually like bloom.
Oh, wow.
Like all of
Open
the
and
flowers would
close.
be like would actually like open up and bloom. Um, and like that, for a variety of reasons, was just like insane,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
completely insane to try to process that. I also made kind of like a poster version
Hmm.
like this, and there's kind of like information about like accessory information. So and this is kind of like, you know I think like good thinking early on, which is, I like, oh, there's like a poster version of this, but I can lop off the top square of the poster and put
Hmm.
that on Instagram, right? Because, back then, I don't know if Instagram allowed you to, I don't think so a long time ago, you could only publish squares on Instagram.
Right.
And,
Right. Yeah.
and so like, you can see that there's like some sense of, oh, I want this to work on Instagram. But then I also like this idea of a printed poster. And so there's a printed poster version of the project as well. And here you can see like kind of like frame by frame. So that's Bloom. And what's interesting, I don't know, like I think like I think what's interesting about it is that I actually still use it like quite prominently. And so if you go to my website today, you'll see this like humanized data see the world, and it's actually the background
Hmm.
for like, for my big shingle. And like, you can go down and you can see, a more modern sort of kind of more modern uh kind of website aesthetic. But even 10 years later, oh, there's me. 10 years later, um you have Bloom kind of like, still kind of like center stage. And so okay, so that's Bloom. I think we had another like kind of like uh uh sector to address, but I've forgotten it already.
Yeah, I know. I just want to say this is fantastic. I have a similar experience with when you hit on a really good graphic image or project like that that hits that you know has resonated. You
Mm.
really can use it over time.
Yes.
And especially it's kind of timeless. I loved that breakdown of the elements going into that project. That was fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, you want to talk about tech?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, how you have seen things changing. Things the tools that my students are using are so different than the tools that, I actually use.
Sure.
But and
Okay,
how
so
you
okay, all right. Here's my tech rant. There's one piece of technology that I use in every single project. It's the most important piece of technology, which is this. It's a pencil
Mhm.
and
Thank you.
paper. So
Thank you.
nearly every uh really talented information designer I know has an analog and digital hybrid workflow, meaning because there's certain things that computers really good at, there's certain things drawing is really good at, and they go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so the computer's really good at helping you scale and do things, with data in kind of like a very performative way. But unless you're like a top 1% coder or something, it's very hard to move fast with the computer. Whereas the most natural linkage between the human mind and the external world is the pencil. And so everybody I know is and whose workflows I'm familiar with is like me in that they're working with paper and pencil, or crayons or colored pencils or pens or whatever. Okay, so invest. This is a luxury item you can afford, which is like buy like a Blackwing pencil. Buy a $2 pencil and enjoy it, and then buy another one or buy a whole box of them. Okay, so that's the most important piece of technology. What I've observed throughout my career is that um, uh, analog information graphics really reached some spectacular heights in the 20th century, and then we switched over. And so when you're making analog, meaning non-digital, information graphics, you have people who are draftsmen, essentially people who know how to draw. Then the computer comes in, and you don't have artists or draftspeople anymore working with information graphics. You have computer programmers, computer scientists, people who do not know how to draw. And so what we're in the midst of is is a field that is characterized by a lack of illustration in a way that wasn't true pre-digital. And so we're sort of still clawing our way back to incorporate more and more illustration into information graphics today. And so I wouldn't I mean and there's certain aspects of digital information graphics which are new and wonderful, and there's a lot of aspects that are still lacking. And so it's a field that's still in development or in transition. Across my career, what I've seen is that there is a real enthusiasm for um, what I consider digital contraptions, interactive stuff that moves, scrolly telling. Um, and my experience with making all that kind of stuff is it's not worth it.
Mhm.
Is that the effort required to make contraptions is just not worth it. And so I've turned my attention to making really fantastic static graphics, really fantastic single images. And then I've pushed even further in that my other experience with the internet is that the internet's really fleeting. Stuff breaks. It's become nearly impossible to get anybody's attention to things on the internet, any kind of content. Um, you know, mostly because of Facebook Meta and TikTok, and maybe to a lesser extent, Twitter. And so it's just basically, if you want people's eyeballs on your stuff on the internet, you have to pay for it these days. I can't. It's hard to emphasize how disillusioned and disappointed creatives are with how the internet has sort of evolved. And so partially because of that, and partially because I really love books. This is not a fake
Love
background.
this transition.
These are all real. Um, is that the technology I've invested in is one that's much more durable than a GIF, which is the printed book. So this is my new book. This is coming out in 2025. It's called Info We Trust.
Excellent.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I'm so
Cool.
proud of it. And this is not the first book I've produced, but it's the newest one. We're actually having a party at Letterform Archive. I don't know when this is going to
Ooh.
be shown, but we're having a party in March at Letterform Archive, and so
Ooh,
everybody,
invite me and I'll invite the class.
yeah, so
I'm
everybody should,
always dying to get them down there to the
yeah.
Letterform Archive, so this is a great excuse.
Okay, yeah. So come to Letterform Archive. We're gonna have I think we're gonna have food and beverage and kind of like a design chat. And it's gonna be a lot of
Mhm.
fun. So I'll make sure to include you in that. But yeah, I've turned to books. I mean, the thing about I don't know, a New York Times digital contraption is, there's a good chance it won't work at all in 5 years.
Mhm.
Um, Even better chance that most of the population won't be able to access it because it's behind a paywall. But if you publish a book and it's acquired by a certain number of libraries, like people will be able to find it decades from now. And so I really love books. I mean, thinking back to the pencil, the reason the book is how it is, at least a good book, is that it's an extension of the books are the size they are, the weight that they are, because they're extensions of the human body. Like we didn't get too much into information design theory, but my whole perspective is something called embodied cognition, which is the way we experience the world is all based on how our body is made up.
Mhm.
The fact that we have forward facing eyes that are at the top of our head, the way we process color, et cetera, et cetera. And so a book feels good because it's built for your body in a way that screens frankly are not. I mean, I don't know, if you read a book, your hands don't hurt, for example. Whereas, like, if you scroll your phone for too long, your fingers will hurt, your hands will hurt, right? Like they're just not built for the human body in the same way that books are. Okay, so that's like the technology, that I've been investing, quite a lot of like time and resources in. And okay, so I know, like, we only wanted to talk
Well,
for
I
40
think I
minutes. Is
think
there?
we've covered so much great stuff. I love ending with the book because I too am a book designer. That's what I do. I
Yeah.
find the power of books is where the power of word and image coming together
Mm.
is so strong and so powerful. Um, and I am encouraging, I'm really getting my students to become familiar with Chronicle books because we have established a mentorship program with their book designers.
Oh, wow. That's
So
great. Yeah, I mean,
reestablishing a connection to books is fantastic because reading itself is really, really important for
mm,
building writing skills and vocabulary and ways of connecting to different thinking. So
sure.
these are all connected to the notion of the book as an object. And a lot of
Yeah.
my students are actually industrial designers or product designers
Hmm.
who thinking about the book as just as you mentioned as a thing, as an object to be designed is
Yeah. I mean, as a book
coming
designer,
back.
yeah, as a book designer, I mean, my experience doing book design, and mind you, I've done all kinds of, technical contraptions, is there's nothing harder, or at least nothing more intellectually stimulating and challenging than designing a book. And I think that's for a couple reasons. One is that a technical contraption you can iterate, so it's published and you can still go back and fix it. Whereas that's not how a book works. A book,
Right,
there's a line in the sand and it goes to press. The
yeah,
um the other thing is that the experience of a book is linear. It's this word, then that word, this sentence, and that sentence, and creating a linear experience is very, very hard. You know, it's like writing a Hollywood script, maybe like a really good Hollywood script, and that, you know, there's a chosen path, and you have to choose every step of that path, and that is very, very difficult to make those choices. So I've, you know, when everything's coming together, especially when images and words are dovetailing perfectly, it's just one of the most, it's one of the most, you know, incredible experiences. And Jose, I can't wait for you to actually, you know, actually see this book. But
Yeah, I
I'm
cannot
just
wait.
I'm really proud of, you know, a lot of our compositions.
Hmm.
You know, and you know, this book is, you know, just is just packed with, you know, illustrations and marginalia, and you know, it's just really, really fun. And I'm currently fulfilling this book, you know, to people all over the world. And I know that because of the book is the way it is, that, you know, there's all these people who are going to open it and just be delighted. And you know, in a way that a similar effort, you know, making a GIF, an animated GIF, just, you know, is like, that's quite fleeting. Where the book is going to have a presence for many, many, many years.
And I hope, and one of I can't wait to have further conversations with you, RJ, because I'm in this really interesting um, process right now. We're having had a book idea and shifted it to the web and created kind of deep content on the web. I am now going back and creating that linear book format from
Mm,
the website. This is
yes.
The Mysterious World of Bulk Kelp. And it is really interesting going through that process of creating the linear narrative,
Mm,
and I am about to start the process of editing and getting to that line in the sand where there are no errors. But I also
mm,
want to just emphasize, because this is something that you just mentioned about collaboration, and I say again about the editing process that you've gone through to get this book to where it is. I'm about to go through with a book project, and it's true of every portfolio, every design project, is that editing process always makes things better. It is
yes.
so rewarding. And it's usually a collaborative process, and
Yes.
I find it very, very rewarding process.
Excellent.
Cool.
Excellent.
Well,
Okay.
RJ, thank you so much. And I'm going to stop recording here. I can, let me